I didn't mean to stay late. The repair shop had sucked me in like usual. Engines, grease, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. But when my friend texted that his evening plans had fallen through, I found myself standing outside his apartment, half hoping for an excuse to leave, half hoping to stay. I barely knocked before the door swung open, and there she was. His sister. Not like in some cookie-cutter way, but like someone who existed in the edges of memory and sunlight, all at once confident and slightly off balance in her own rhythm. She was mid-40s, I'd guess, but there was something about the tilt of her head, the way she examined the space around her, that made the age thing almost irrelevant. "I missed you tonight," she said, slow, deliberate, like each word was weighing itself before landing. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't flirtatious. It was soft but firm, casual and intimate in the same breath. I blinked. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, somehow, the idea that I might leave suddenly felt wrong. She stepped aside, just enough for me to slip past her into the apartment. The scent of old books mixed with faint vanilla, maybe from a candle, maybe from her, and it made the room feel warmer, smaller, and more charged than it should have. I dropped my backpack near the couch. She didn't rush away. Instead, she perched on the armrest, careful, deliberate, like she knew exactly where to place herself in the space between us. There was a pause, a weighty, stretched-out pause, the kind that makes you notice every little thing. The way her fingers curled around the fabric of the couch, the half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the way the light caught the strands of silver in her hair. "So long day?" I asked, fumbling for something to anchor the moment, but my voice sounded too eager, too loud. "Longer than I expected," she said, tilting her head as if she might reveal something more, or maybe she wasn't. The look she gave me lingered. Not accusing, not inviting exactly, just there. It was the kind of gaze that feels like it should be broken, but you can't move. I went to the kitchen for water, pretending the glass could make the tension less obvious. She followed, not behind me, not ahead, but in that subtle, almost unconscious orbit. She reached for a mug at the same time as me. Our hands brushed. Not a spark, not a jolt, not a line from a movie, but enough that I remembered it, remembered her, for reasons I couldn't quite name. "You always drink it like that?" she asked, nodding toward the glass as I sipped. "Like what?" She leaned slightly, elbows on the counter, face just close enough to make casual conversation feel like a shared secret. "Like you're measuring how much water the room can hold without spilling it." I laughed, short, self-conscious. She did too, but her laugh lingered longer than it should. And then she tilted her head, one hand toying with a strand of hair, and the silence that followed was thicker than the conversation had ever been. I went to set my glass down, but my hand lingered near hers. I caught myself staring, noticing how she seemed impossibly grounded and yet somehow untouchable. And just like that, the evening, the apartment, the air between us, everything felt charged in a way I couldn't name, couldn't reason through. As I sank onto the couch, she perched opposite, and our eyes met again. That small, quiet gaze lingered, and I realized I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd said, "I missed you tonight." Even now, I kept hearing it, a whisper that refused to leave my mind, a question I didn't yet have the courage to answer. I didn't plan on sticking around long the next evening either, but when she asked for help moving a stack of old books from her study to the living room, my no got stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth. Her apartment was quieter this time, the hum of the heater filling in the spaces between us. She was perched on the edge of a chair, one elbow resting on the armrest, the other hand fiddling with the cuff of her sleeve. I noticed her hands first, the faint tremor in her fingers as she stacked a few books, the way her nails caught the dim light. It wasn't just tiredness. There was a restraint there, like she was measuring how much of herself she could let slip without noticing. "Careful," she murmured as I reached for a book that teetered on the edge of the pile. Her voice was softer than yesterday, a little cracked at the edges. I half smiled and nodded, though I had no idea if she saw it. We moved in a rhythm that felt neither rushed nor natural. Boxes shifted between us, and for a moment I could hear the scrape of the carpet under our feet, the quiet sighs as she adjusted a stack here, a book there. She kept glancing at me, but each look seemed hesitant, as if she was testing some invisible line she didn't want to cross. At one point, she paused and let a small laugh escape, quiet and almost embarrassed, as a book nearly slipped from her hands. It wasn't loud, not even really directed at me, but I noticed. I noticed everything. The way her shoulders curved slightly forward in that brief flicker of fatigue, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the faint crease of worry between her brows. She seemed so strong, so in control, yet in those small, unguarded moments, she felt impossibly fragile. "You sure you don't want me to carry more?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, careful not to sound like I was staring. Her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, something flickered there. Hesitation, maybe, or acknowledgement. She shook her head, tight-lipped, but didn't smile. I'll manage," she said, almost too quickly. Then she looked away, busying herself with the next stack of books, and I caught the soft catch in her breath. I stepped closer, quietly moving a box for her. My hand brushed hers. Again, a fleeting, accidental touch, and I saw her pause. Not pulling away, not leaning in, just stopping. That small hesitation said more than words ever could. She exhaled softly and gave me the tiniest nod of thanks. Not a smile, not a laugh, just a tilt of the head that somehow carried weight. And in that fraction of a second, I felt the charge between us, subtle and unspoken, stretching the space, pulling tight in ways I couldn't explain. I kept noticing her, even when she tried to disappear behind her own tasks. How tired she looked in the corner of her eyes, how precise her movements were, how she seemed to hold herself together with sheer force of will. And when she finally leaned back, shoulders easing, there was a moment where our gazes met again, lingering longer than polite, longer than comfortable. I wanted to say something, anything, but the air itself seemed to hum, vibrating between restraint and something more. I just stayed there, quietly, feeling it, the pull, the weight of unspoken things, as if the room itself had conspired to make us notice. And in that charged silence, I realized I could have stayed like that forever, noticing her, caught in the quiet gravity of someone I wasn't supposed to understand, yet couldn't stop wanting to. It was late. The rain had started quietly at first, tapping the windows, then building into that steady, relentless rhythm that makes the world feel smaller and sharper at the edges. She'd insisted I stay for dinner. "Just a quiet meal," she said. But the way she carried the plates, careful not to spill, made the evening feel heavier than casual. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Candles flickered, but not enough to soften the tension. Every glance between us seemed amplified. The way her eyes caught the light, the subtle twitch of her jaw, the small pause before she set down her fork. I didn't expect you to stay," she murmured, breaking the silence, almost shyly. Her words were soft, but the tremor underneath them didn't go unnoticed. "Thought it might be easier than standing out in the rain," I replied, keeping my voice level, even though my heart was arguing in a completely different key. She laughed, quietly, brushing a hand across her forehead. "You're probably just here for the food," she said, teasing herself as much as me. But the laugh didn't reach her eyes, and I caught that hesitation, the part she was keeping just out of reach. The storm outside made the apartment feel smaller. My elbow nudged the table, close enough that our arms almost touched. I wanted to linger there, to let my fingers brush hers, but the restraint, hers and mine, kept it just shy of possibility. I sipped my water, pretending the glass absorbed my awareness of every tiny movement she made. A sudden phone buzz broke the fragile rhythm. She glanced at the screen, lips pressing into a thin line. An ex, maybe, or someone from earlier days, calling at an inconvenient hour. She ignored it, slipped the phone back onto the counter, but the shadow crossed her face for just a moment, the hesitation, the almost, that I felt like I could see through. I wanted to reach out, ask if she needed to talk, offer something I couldn't name. But I didn't. I only watched. And in that watching, I noticed everything. The way her hair fell across one shoulder, how she tucked it behind her ear absent-mindedly, how her hand hovered over the fork, fingers trembling slightly, how tired she looked, yet she wouldn't let herself lean back fully, wouldn't let herself relax. Our conversation was stilted, careful, but there were pauses pregnant with what we weren't saying. I wanted to tell her something, anything, but even the words in my mind felt like they would shatter if spoken aloud. I settled for the quiet acknowledgement in my eyes, hoping she would read it, or not. As the rain hammered harder against the windows, I shifted slightly, closer, my knee brushing hers under the table. She didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either. The pause stretched, heavy with unsaid things. I could feel the pulse of the storm mirrored in the quickening beat in my chest, mirrored in the faint hitch in her breathing. And then, almost, our hands met on the table. Almost. But just as the tension peaked, the phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, and the moment slipped, unclaimed, leaving a quiet ache behind. I leaned back, exhaling slowly, pretending to check my own phone, while my mind replayed the brush of possibility that had just vanished, leaving the room charged with what might have been. The apartment was quieter than usual. The rain had stopped, leaving only the faint smell of wet concrete drifting in through the cracked window. We sat on opposite sides of the living room couch, the dim lamplight stretching shadows across the walls. Neither of us moved at first, just listening to the silence, the kind that presses against your ribs, makes you aware of every heartbeat. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, hesitant, but it cut through the stillness. "Do you ever wonder what we're doing?" I froze for a second, not because of the words themselves, but because of the way she said them, like she was asking herself just as much as she was asking me. Her eyes, usually so composed, now held something raw, something unpolished, something I wasn't supposed to see. I don't know," I admitted, my own voice quieter than I intended. I looked down at my hands, twisting them in my lap, trying to anchor myself. The room felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in closer to listen. She exhaled slowly, the sound almost a whisper, and for a moment I thought she might crumble. But instead, she just sat there, shoulders tight, gaze fixed somewhere beyond me. I don't think we can pretend anymore," she said. "Not like this. Not after tonight." My stomach tightened. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck, heavy and useless. I could only watch the way her fingers grazed the armrest, tracing invisible patterns, how her lips pressed together like she was holding herself back from saying more than she already had. I shifted closer, careful not to bridge the space entirely. It felt dangerous, like even the air between us had weight. "I didn't mean," I started, but she shook her head slightly, not angrily, just firmly. "No," she said. "Not you. Not anyone. I mean us. What are we doing here? With each other? With this?" She gestured vaguely between us, like words alone couldn't define it. I swallowed, my throat tight. The honesty hung there, raw and jagged, slicing through the comfortable fiction we'd been clinging to. Her vulnerability was laid bare, yet she still carried herself with that same measured confidence, that strange combination of fragility and control. We didn't speak for several moments. I could feel the rhythm of her breathing, the slight tremor in her hands, the tension coiled around her jaw. I wanted to reach out, to offer something, to say I understood, even though I barely did. But the truth was heavier than anything I could put into words. Finally, she looked at me, eyes glistening but steady, and whispered, "I don't know if I can keep doing this, or if I even want to stop." The words landed in the room like a stone in still water. I felt it ripple through me, making my chest ache, making my limbs heavy. I wanted to argue, to reassure, to bridge the silence, but I couldn't. Not yet. All I could do was sit there, caught in the gravity of what she'd just admitted, feeling the fragile thread of connection taut between us, threatening to snap. And in that quiet, I realized, whatever this was, whatever it had been, we were already too far in to turn back. I hadn't expected her to talk about it. Not tonight, not after the weight of the last few evenings. But she was perched on the couch, legs tucked under her, hands clutching a worn envelope like it might steady her. I haven't thought about this in years, she said, voice tight, almost shaking. She opened the envelope slowly, unfolding a faded photograph. The edges were frayed, the ink slightly smudged. I recognized a younger version of her, laughing, carefree, next to someone I didn't know. Her thumb traced the outline of the figure's face, hesitant, reverent. That was my husband, she said quietly. Before everything changed. I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. I hadn't known she'd been married, hadn't imagined the life behind the confident exterior she wore so easily. The air felt heavier, filled with something I couldn't name. Loss, yes, but also memory, longing, the invisible weight of someone absent. I wasn't ready to let him go, she admitted. Her gaze lifted, meeting mine just for a moment, then dropping again. Even after all this time, sometimes it still feels like he's here, watching, waiting for me to remember him correctly. I didn't respond at first. I just watched her, noticing the way her shoulders tightened and relaxed with each breath, the small twitch of her hand as it hovered over the photograph. And I realized how much she carried beneath that poised, controlled exterior. Not just the present tension between us, but decades of quiet heartbreak she hadn't shared with anyone. Not fully. I reached out slowly, almost instinctively, but didn't touch. My fingers hovered above the edge of the envelope. I wish I could have met him, I said finally, my voice soft. You talk about him like he mattered, like he still matters. Her lips pressed together, and for a moment she laughed softly, a sound more sad than amused. He did matter, she said, more than I could ever explain. And maybe that's why I hesitate with anything else. Anyone else. The honesty of it hit me harder than I expected. Not anger, not jealousy, just a kind of ache, the recognition that her walls weren't about me, not exactly. They were about years of absence, loss, and the echoes of love she couldn't reclaim. I leaned back slightly, letting the silence settle between us. She stared at the photo again, tracing the outline of his smile. The room felt still, suspended, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for some invisible signal that didn't come. And then she looked at me, really looked, eyes wide, vulnerable, searching. I don't know if I even know how to feel about this, she whispered. Her hand trembled slightly, the photograph trembling with it. I swallowed, trying to keep my own emotions in check. The storm of unspoken things, our tension, her past, my feelings, swirled quietly between us, heavy but unannounced. And in that moment, as the envelope rested on her lap, a soft, seismic shift occurred, not in words, not in gestures, just in the gravity of everything we'd been avoiding. I realized I couldn't turn away. I didn't want to. She glanced up, eyes shimmering in the lamplight, and whispered, I've been waiting for something I can't name. Maybe it's you. We didn't speak for a long time after that night with the photograph. The apartment felt different somehow, lighter, heavier, all at once. Every movement, every glance carried the weight of what had been said and left unsaid. I found myself sitting near her on the couch, careful to give space, yet aware that the space between us had already dissolved. She was reading a book, but her eyes kept flicking up to mine, a quiet acknowledgement that we were here, together, without needing words. I don't think we can ignore this anymore, she said finally, voice soft, deliberate, almost hesitant. Whatever this is, it's happening whether we want it to or not. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I know, I said. No more hesitation. No more pretending. The truth was already there, hanging in the air like the last note of a song you can't quite forget. We didn't rush. There was no sudden move, no dramatic confession. Just the recognition that the distance we'd maintained, emotional, physical, imaginary, was no longer necessary. She shifted slightly, the weight of her body settling closer to mine, and I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, soft, familiar, grounding. Her hand brushed mine, accidental at first, then deliberately, fingers threading together like a question and an answer rolled into one. I didn't pull away. I didn't need to. The touch said everything our words never could. Care, recognition, a kind of tentative trust. We leaned back into the couch, shoulders nearly touching, breaths aligning. The world outside the apartment, the past she'd carried, the awkward tension of the beginning. It all seemed to fold into this quiet corner, leaving only us, present, aware, unafraid for the first time. She tilted her head slightly, resting it near mine, eyes closing for a moment as if allowing herself to simply exist here, now. I watched her, memorizing the curve of her jaw, the line of her cheek, the subtle rise and fall of her chest with each breath. No dramatic confessions, no sweeping declarations. Just understanding. A shared acknowledgement of something that had grown slowly, painfully, and beautifully between us. I think I can trust this, she murmured, almost to herself, fingers still intertwined with mine. I think so too, I replied, voice barely above a whisper. And that was it. No fireworks, no grand gestures, just the quiet gravity of proximity, of trust, of two people who had navigated hesitation, grief, and unspoken longing, finally arriving at a point where connection wasn't a choice. It was inevitable. The storm outside had passed. Rain tapped faintly against the windows now, a gentle rhythm, unhurried. And as we sat there, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, a soft warmth spread quietly through both of us, grounding and real. We didn't need to say anything else. The space between us was gone. The moment was ours. And in that silence, I realized some things didn't need words to exist. They just needed to be felt. Looking back, it's strange how quietly everything shifted. I don't remember a single dramatic moment when it all changed, just a series of small gestures, long silences, and glances that lingered a second too long. Some nights I think about the first time she said, "I missed you tonight," and how that simple sentence, spoken almost casually, became the thread that pulled everything into place. She's different now, still confident, still measured, but softer in ways only I get to see. The walls she carried for so long haven't disappeared entirely, but she doesn't hide behind them the way she used to. She laughs more freely, lets herself pause, allows a hesitation here or there without pretending it's a flaw. And I've changed too. I've learned to sit with uncertainty, to feel without rushing, to notice the quiet rhythms of someone else's life without trying to rearrange them. We've discovered that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or grand declarations. Sometimes it slips in through the cracks of your day, in the unspoken understanding of two people who see each other clearly, flaws and all. It's the small things that make it real. The brush of fingers, the shared silence after a word too heavy to say, the way she tilts her head toward me now without thinking. Even the moments of hesitation, of almost action, of restrained desire, they weren't mistakes. They were part of the slow weaving of trust and care. Each pause, each unspoken thought, each carefully chosen glance became a kind of language, and we learned it together. I've come to understand that connection is earned, not assumed. That the most important thing isn't the passion you feel in a single moment, but the willingness to stay, to notice, to be present through the small, mundane, and sometimes painful realities of someone else's world. That's where love grows strongest. And now, sitting here, remembering how far we've come, I can see the subtle ways everything has shifted. The tension that used to hang in the air feels like a memory. Our hands, once hesitant, now find each other naturally. Our conversations, once careful and measured, have room for pauses without fear. And in those quiet spaces, I feel the depth of something that doesn't need to shout to exist. Some nights, I catch her looking at me and wonder if she realizes how much trust, patience, and small courage it took to get here. But I think she does. Because now, when the rain taps against the windows, when the light falls just right across the living room, when the quiet settles in around us, there's a kind of peace, a recognition that this, whatever this is exactly what it needed to be. And for me, that's enough. Enough to sit here, hand in hand, knowing that every step, the hesitation, the near misses, the confessions left almost unspoken, was part of the path that brought us here. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?